The EBF Open Forum is a live Bible questions and answers program. What kind of Bible question do you have? What subject is of concern to you? Well, this is a program designed to offer you the opportunity to call in and ask questions or comments relating to the Bible. Our host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann, will respond by going to the Bible, the infallible Word of God. Our program is hosted Monday through Friday beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, except Wednesdays, when the program begins at noon Eastern. Call our toll-free number at 888-969-9883. Again, that's 888-969-9883. There will be someone there to answer your call and give you simple instructions to be on the program. You can also join us through Zoom video by going to ebiblefellowship.org and clicking the icon at the top. If you're calling in from another country, on our website, select the toll-free button to find your country's number.
Welcome, everyone, to E-Bible Fellowship's Open Forum program. During this time, we're going to open up the phone lines to take your call, and each person is invited to give us a call if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, and I'll try to respond by going to the Bible directly in order to see if we can find the answer to your question. Now, before we begin, I'd like to just make a couple of announcements. First, Lord willing, we're going to have a virtual Day in the Word the fourth Sunday in October. And that means we'll have a virtual choir to go along with that. And if you're interested in joining the virtual choir, I believe they're going to sing Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. Send us an email. You can write to info at ebiblefellowship.org. And just say, I'm interested in joining in the virtual choir, or I want more information. Can you give me more information? Someone will get back to you and give you all the information that you need, explaining how you can record yourself, upload it to Dropbox, and join in the virtual choir. It's not as hard as you might think, and especially when you have help, and there will be people that will help you to understand what you have to do. So if that's holding you back, if you'd like to join, but you don't feel that you have the technical know-how, don't let that stop you. All right, you can just send the email, say you're interested, and let's see if someone can help you in guiding you with how to record yourself and so forth. I mean, you haven't lost anything, and any point along the way, you can just say, no, I don't want to do, I don't think I can do this, or whatever you want to say. So again, if you're interested, write to that email address. Also, we now have some business cards, the invitation to listen to this program, the New Open Forum. It has the website, newopenforum.org, and the call-in number, the new one to this program. We have some cards that have come in for the East Coast and the West Coast. I'm sorry if your central location, we don't have that at this time, but we have cards for either coast. And if you would like some, same email address, info at ebiblefellowship.org. and just request some business cards and we'll send them to you. We also have received the other tracks. You're aware of our main track, Why is the World So Divided? Well, that track was actually our third track. We have two others. One is No More Salvation, and the other is Spiritual Judgment Began May 21, 2011. We have those other two. Well, now we have all three tracks. All three tracks available. If you would like, a number of tracks, write us, same email address, and request 25, 50 tracks or whatever, and also specify which track. Why is the World So Divided? Or No More Salvation, or Spiritual Judgment, May 21. And we will send you the tracks. Okay, let's get started by going to the first person on the phone this evening. Welcome to our question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hello, Chris.
Yes, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you real good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
I'm enjoying your study on biblical evidence for 2033. I was wondering if you have that in a book form, or have you written any books?
No,
on those subjects?
Not specifically on that topic. Lord willing, we'll probably develop something down the line, but there you'll find mention of 2033. I believe we have a new booklet out, Thy Kingdom Come. There's probably mention of it in that booklet and in some of the other books, but nothing, laying it all out. And I think this is kind of the first step where we'll have these recordings, and we have a very faithful person who has been transcribing e-Bible messages for a lot of years now, and it's a big help. It's a big help because however many of these studies we do, let's say there's 100 of them, they'll all be transcribed, Lord willing. And then it's just a matter of editing. You can go in and okay, that's redundant. Let's get rid of that. And you have a lot of material to work with. So it's a good first step along the way to developing some books specifically geared for that. Now there is another booklet we have, Yet 40 Days, based on chapter 3, that goes into detail about the 40 years from 1994 to 2033. But we pulled that temporarily to be reworked, and that will probably be the first thing that would be ready, focused on 2033.
Now, one more question. Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Do you meet with other believers on Sunday at an actual physical building for worship?
Well, we used to have a fellowship. It's kind of morphed, like prior to May 21, 2011, we had a fellowship in Delco Fellowship, Delaware County. And we were meeting every Sunday. Then after May 21, 2011, we were basically evicted from the building we were using. It was a union building. And then we started floating around, and the number of times we were meeting gradually decreased till now we call them Day in the Words. We just had one in September, and we have both in person and we have virtual. So in September, it was in person. We meet in Millville, New Jersey, and Millville's like an hour from Philadelphia. And in October, it'll be virtual. I'll have to check, but I think November will be in person. So we probably meet all together, including a Bible conference, about 8 or 9 times, 8 or 9 days out of the year, in person.
Now, Chris, just one more quick thing. Do you have, I'm looking for as much information I can find out about this delayed drawing program.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see much on that on your website.
There was a series of studies, 3 or 4 studies, that I think you can go to our website, ebiblefellowship.org.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a search bar. You can try that. Just put in delay drawing. I'm not sure if they're on YouTube. Unfortunately, I'm not really the best. If you write us info,
I could direct them to where to go.
I'm sorry.
I can direct them on where to go.
Okay.
So on the website, if he goes to the studies tab at the top, there's a you'll see a tab that says Sunday series to the right, and in the series playlist you'll find it there.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you for calling. And let's go now to the next person on the phone. Welcome to our program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. Can you go to Genesis 39:20?
Okay, Genesis 39. And verse 20 says, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison.
Can you also go to Genesis 41:1?
Okay, Genesis 41, verse 1. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river.
I'm calling about the time Joseph spent in prison. A friend of mine says that he was spent 13 years total, but I thought based on for Genesis 41:1, it was 2 years in prison. Can you help me with that?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. We know Joseph was 17 years old when he was sold by his brothers to the Midianite merchantmen, and they in turn sold him as a slave to Potiphar, who was a captain of the guard in Egypt, and he worked in Potiphar's house. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us directly how long he worked in Potiphar's house, but we do find that he worked there long enough that his master realized how excellent he was, and he entrusted everything into his care. You don't do that overnight. You probably wouldn't do that even after 6 months, or probably it would be a period of time. And Potiphar is observing and noting Well, yes, he's handling that very well, very well. But he's an unknown individual to him, a slave. And so more than likely, he watched him for some time. And I think the reference here in Genesis 41, it came to pass at the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And our question is, well, 2 full years in relationship to what? What's in view? And I think you're correct. I think you have the right idea that it's referring to Joseph's prison stay, that he was 2 full years in prison. Now think what that does to the 13 years. We know Joseph comes out of prison at age 30. So he's sold as a slave, age 17 to 30, 13 years, which is not surprising in the life of Joseph. Joseph was born when Jacob, his father, was 91. And that 91 breaks down to 7 times 13. Joseph, when Jacob is brought into Egypt and Pharaoh says, "How old are you?" And Jacob answers, "I'm 130. And 130 is 10 times 13. At that very time, we can know the age of Joseph because he was born when Jacob was 91. And so what would that make Joseph if Jacob's 130? 39 years old. 3 times 13. We start to really get the point, especially in the lives of Jacob and Joseph. 13. Why? Because the famine, the great dearth, as it's called in Acts chapter 7, in the Greek, in Acts 7, are the 2 words great tribulation, megastalipsis, same as Matthew 24. So that 7-year famine typifies the great tribulation. When did the great tribulation begin? 1988, the 13,000th year of Earth's history. Coincidental? No. And so here, 13 years of Joseph's captivity, and now we can break it down. 11 years a slave, 2 years a prisoner. And you see what that does. What is the timeline for the history of the world? As we look into the Bible and we've discovered by God's grace the biblical calendar of history, how many thousands of years until the first coming of Christ? 11,000 years plus 6 in 7 BC. It was 11,006 years from creation. More than likely that 6 years was 2,300 evening mornings, because 2,300 days works out to 6 years and almost 4 months. And how many years to the second coming of Christ? Well, 13,000, 1988 plus 6 for the official coming, the official judgment on the church, 1994. Again, and we do know absolutely 2,300 days from 1988 to 1994. And so we have 2 main dates. The Bible constantly focuses on the first coming of the Lord and the number 11,000. Second coming of the Lord and the number 13,000. And here we see in the case of Joseph, 13 years broken up, 11 and 2. And it's not the first time. If we go back to Genesis chapter 39. No, I'm sorry, Genesis 37. Genesis 37, Joseph has a dream, and he says in Genesis 37, in verse 6, and he said unto them, he's speaking to his brothers, "Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaf stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words." How many brothers did Joseph have? 11. 11 in the dream were bowing down to him. And then he had a second dream. Verse 9, and he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the same. In the second dream, there is the sun, moon, and 11 stars. And we're also told the sun identifies with Jacob, the moon with his mother, and the 11 stars, 11 brethren, which confirms our earlier understanding. When the sheaves bowed down, there was 11. So 2 dreams. In one, only the brothers, only 11. In the second dream, the 11 brothers, typified by the stars, and the sun and the moon equals 13. 11, 13. It is way beyond coincidence. Way beyond coincidence. And in both of these dreams, there is bowing down to Joseph as he's a great type of Christ. Why? Because Jesus will come, King of the Jews. He will come into the world and be worshiped by his people after 11,000 years. And then he will come a second time and be worshiped by his people. And after 13,000 years. So we see a similar breakdown with the 13-year period. Well, thank you for that interesting question. And let's go now to the next caller. Welcome to our new open forum program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. Go to John chapter 2, verses 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, John 2. John 2, verse 3. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, They have no wine. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith unto the servants, Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it.
Yeah, I always had a little trouble with this. When she said they have no wine, well, Jesus is on the earth, right? And they had the Bible, the Old Testament, so they do have wine. So this wine, I'm wondering, is wine for blood for the demonstration at the cross. He didn't get there yet. Is that what they're referring to? And also, woman, what have I to do with thee? She represents the true believers, right? So why would he say the true believers, what do I have to do with thee? That's really
Yeah, and it's almost comical that his mother just ignores what he said. Whatever he says, do it. Whatever he says, because she's come to know that he speaks in parables, and this is a parable especially when we read, mine hour is not yet come. So this will have something to do with his hour. It's similar to, in John 7, there's another head scratcher when the Feast of Tabernacles is involved, and he's with his brethren, and they say in verse 8, go ye up unto this feast. I go not up yet unto this feast, for my time is not yet full come. When he had said these words unto them, he abode still in Galilee. But when his brethren were gone up, then went he also up unto the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. So he says, I go not up unto this feast, for my time is not come. And then the next thing we read, he went. And that's because he's referring to the spiritual fulfillment of the Feast of Tabernacles. It wasn't time for that, but it, as far as a historical, going that year at that time, that's no problem. Same thing here, reference to the hour, mine hour is not yet come. In relationship to wine, where have we heard, or when we read of the hour, what have we learned in the past? Mr. Camping pointed this out. The Great Tribulation's typified by an hour. It's an hour, the 12th hour in the parable of the workers in the vineyard. They work 11 hours, and then there's some idle who are hired at the last hour, 11 to 12. It's a 12-hour day. And that last hour represents the Great Tribulation. Then comes the even, the night, when no man works. The 12-hour workday comes to a close after the Great Tribulation. Immediately after the tribulation, the sun's dark, no more. Gospel proclamation. Well, here the wine typifies the gospel, and you got that right. But now, when Mary is, or Christ's mother, is telling him they have no wine, we learn as we read on in verse 7, I'll read from there. Jesus saith unto them, fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. And he saith unto them, draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bear it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and saith unto him, every man at the beginning does set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. There's an implication. They did have wine. They did have wine, and they ran out of wine. That's what the mother was getting at. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, they have no wine, because the initial batch of wine that they had for the wedding feast, it was gone. It was gone. And so there's a period of time they want wine. And that means they lacked it. They didn't have it. They desired wine, but they didn't have any. That's when Mary, and I think you're right that she represents the believers, coming to the Lord, they have no wine. That is God's people going to the Lord Jesus Christ, beseeching him for mercy and grace and salvation for our loved ones, for our friends, for our neighbors, for the people of the world. We have no wine. And then the reference, mine hour is not yet come, ties it to the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation, when Christ will give wine a second time. A second time. So that helps to really explain what's going on. They had wine, that's the church age. Then there's a period they have no wine. The end of the church age, 1988, 2,300 evening mornings, no rain, no early rain, no latter rain, no wine. Virtually no one's being saved. But God has a plan for the last hour, wherein he will save a great multitude. And so he saves the best wine. And that's what the governor of the feast pointed out. This is the best wine you've saved for last. And we could probably lay out a few scriptures indicating that God does save the best for last, that the end of a thing is better than its beginning. And so he sealed up the word until the time of the end, and then he released it. He unveiled it, took the wraps off the Bible, purified the gospel, the doctrine, the faith of Christ, and plus he got rid of the church that had always been a problem due to so many tares amongst the wheat. And so a pure form of the gospel was sent to the nations in the latter rain period, primarily through, let's be honest, we say family radio, but primarily through Mr. Camping's teaching over the airwaves of family radio. It went to the nations in a pure form, no works contaminating that gospel, a far superior gospel wine than previous. And so this, it's amazing, isn't it, that this is the first, or does it say the second? Let's see, in verse 11, this beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. And with this first miracle, he lays out the sending forth of the gospel for the entire New Testament era. The whole church age is here. The whole latter rain period of the Great Tribulation is here. And with the two wines, and we know two outpourings of the Holy Spirit. So it really is a beautiful historical parable. But thank you.
Thank you.
For calling and sharing. And let's go now to the next caller tonight. Welcome to our question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. Can you turn to Colossians 3:19?
Yeah, Colossians chapter 3. And verse 19. It says, husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them.
Can you also go to Revelation 8:11?
Okay, Revelation chapter 8. And the name of the star is called wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter.
And lastly, Numbers chapter 5:24.
And Numbers 5:24. And he shall cause the woman to drink the bitter water that causeth the curse, and the water that causes the curse shall enter into her and become bitter.
I'm wondering, if the husband becomes bitter to his wife, does that marriage become like a false gospel, like a type of false gospel?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, you're right to tie these verses together in Colossians, because God tells us that husbands are in the place of Christ. Christ is the bridegroom, and wives are in the place of the believers, the bride of Christ. And Ephesians 5 tells us, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And wives, submit to your husbands. It's all a portrayal of the spiritual relationship between the Lord Jesus Christ and those that he has saved. And therefore, husbands, let me make sure I get that verse, Colossians 3:11. Make sure I quote it correctly. In verse 11, Colossians 3. Was it verse 11?
I think it was
No, verse 19.
Yeah, 19. Yeah.
Yeah, husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. So in marriage, the husband is always to portray Christ. And that means to love our wives and to forgive. We're to forgive and forbear and not be bitter against them. And because it is a picture of Christ forgiving the sins of his people. And that's what he did. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. How did he love the church? Yes, he died for the church, but he also forgave them just incredible numbers of offenses against himself. So the husband is to forgive and forgive and forgive, and is never allowed, never permitted, never justified to say, I've forgiven enough. That's it. That's the limit. Never permitted to say, well, you committed adultery against me. That's it. That's the pardonable sin. No matter the sin, the husband is called upon in the marriage relationship to always be a picture of Christ and look at his wife as one to be forgiven. When the husband fails to do that and is hardened against her and says or holds the things she done wrong, and of course she's done things wrong, and so is he. But when the husband begins to start getting bitter, starts mulling them over in his mind and thinking badly about his wife, then he is becoming a picture of a false gospel. A false gospel, because false gospels have no forgiveness. They may speak of forgiveness and speak of love and all the things of the true gospel, but they have no actual love or forgiveness. And so the husband's portrayal of Christ is ruined. He is not accurately, faithfully doing what he's called upon to do in marriage, in illustrating the forgiveness of the Savior towards his own self, that if he thinks he's a child of God. And so that's why God tells husbands, do not be bitter against your wife. You're never permitted to perform the role of judge, even though Christ is the judge, not in the marriage. Not in the marriage. Christ is just look at how he treats each one of us. Each one of us. What if Christ treated us as we have treated our wives at times. We wouldn't want that. It would be the end of us. Well, so in these other verses, in Numbers 5, there's the question of whether the wife has been faithful or not, if she has been involved with fornication or not. And so there was a test. They were to go to the priest, and the priest would take some dirt from the ground, put it in water, and give her to drink. And if she had been unfaithful to her husband, then it would become bitter water that would cause her belly to bloat and her thighs to rot. And basically it indicates she would have no children. She would be unfruitful. And if the wife were not guilty of adultery, then when she drank the bitter water, it would have no effect upon her. So really, that's a picture of what God did with the end time churches and congregations. He came due to their unfaithfulness to visit, and he gave them through Satan, as he loosed Satan, and Satan brought the bitter water. He brought all the false gospels, and they multiplied across the congregations of the world. And if the churches, or really the individuals within the churches, were unfaithful, they never had become saved, the bitter water would destroy them, and they would not bring forth any longer spiritual fruit. There would be no more salvation within the congregations, within those churches, within the entire church corporate. But for God's people within the churches and congregations, it's very similar to Mark 16. No deadly thing will harm the true elect child of God. Not that we seek it out, but when God turned the waters of the church, as in Revelation 8, that's the judgment upon the corporate church, the waters are turned to wormwood, bitter water that causes the curse. And at the time God did this, God's elect were within the congregations. But we were not in danger in any way because the Lord had his hand upon us. Either we were already saved, or he drew us out to come out of the church for the latter rain, and there the people would be saved who were elect.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you for a good question. And let's go now to the next caller tonight. Welcome to our question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Yes. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
I really liked that last call and your answer. That was great. I'm somebody who was really kind of lost after May 21st, and couldn't go back, couldn't bring myself to church, any church or anything, and I was just searching, looking, and I went back through all of the old, the information from Harold Camping and the books and the videos and everything, and I went over it and over it, and I can't find anything wrong, but there's just one small thing that bothers me that maybe you could help me with, and it's the Jacob and Haran 20 or 40 years. And it just seems to me that when he's asked, the later they go on to talk a lot about the children and the young ones while Jacob is traveling and it seems to imply that they're all very young, which makes the case for the difference in ages between Levi and Joseph kind of hard to nail down really solid. Is there anything that you can relay about that can help me?
Well, yeah, when you look at I think it's been said that there's I can't remember exactly where it is, the verse that indicates 20 years, because it's actually broken up in it's 20 plus 20 for 40, but the way God wrote it, you could read it as only 20, and that's what some people have tried to do, and it just doesn't leave sufficient time, because the first 7 years out of that 20, if it were 20, there were no children. Jacob wasn't married. He had to work the first 7 years, so that only leaves 13 years. And then we know that Joseph was born towards the end, and there was a few years still in Haran after Joseph was born. Benjamin wasn't born until they came out of Haran, so Joseph was the last one born. And there's a few years after that, so that narrows that window down to just no more than like 9 or 10 years of possible childbearing. And when you look at all the events, there's no way those events took place over such a short period of time. The way Mr. Camping lays it out, that it's actually referring to 20 and 20, and you have to add them together, 40. It's accurate because we know that Jacob was 60 years old when he left Canaan and went to Haran. And the number 20, it would be unusual to have a period where you go from 60 to 80. I can't think of in the life of the patriarchs where that's emphasized, but 40 added to 60 gives you 100. And yes, we can see that emphasized with Abraham, and the number 40, testing, and that's exactly what's involved with Jacob's trip to Haran. And it's really illustrated. He's fleeing his brother Esau, and then when he comes out, who does he meet up with? Esau and 400 men. 400, 10 times 40, after 40 years. So testing's emphasized. But more than that, you'll find some people who they can't fault the biblical calendar. They, from Adam going down the generations all the way to we can carry it all the way down through the kings, and they can't find fault with that. So what they do is they look at either the how did Mr. Camping put it, the time bridge of the Exodus, or they look at Jacob's 40-year period in Haran, which has nothing to do with the biblical calendar. As far as accurate time dates and events taking place, that wouldn't impact the biblical calendar in any way. So it's really just a question of carefully working through it, and then we can see it turns out to be 40 years.
Okay, so I follow. So that whole thing of the 21-year difference basically just supports for the Kerashem doctrine. as
Well,
the
yeah,
time
well,
bridge through
right.
through
See, that's
Egypt
why they get into this whole issue. How long was Jacob in Haran? Because they really want to come against the time bridge, which
Okay.
involves
Which
Levi's
escaped the whole
age.
calendar.
It involves
Right.
Levi's age at the end, at the point of entering into Egypt. And they, and I've talked to people and they've written me and they said, well, this is wrong. And so the whole calendar is wrong. It is what they're trying to say. And they don't realize that was a biblical historical example, no more than an example of how God gave us the biblical calendar end to end. So you have Levi upon his death, then the other individuals, Amram and another guy, and then Aaron with the 80 years, and you and come on, when you we don't receive, or God doesn't give us dates of all these individuals who spend time in Egypt, but very specifically these men, men. And then when you put them together, okay, we know how old Aaron was at the time of the Exodus. We have these other two individuals' lifespans, and then there is a small assumption made concerning Levi's age upon entering Egypt, that when you take that assumption and you come to a certain age, you get 430 years. And it's not like there you can find any other lifespans given. You see how we're almost forced, we're led by God to come to that conclusion, and then we do see that it is end to end, and it's just a proof. It's a biblical proof. It's a good one for the overall biblical calendar.
Good. Okay.
One last thing, because I was thinking about this yesterday and actually wrote a note about it, that there is a proof. There is a proof. We start with the calendar of history with with Adam, and we walk, we come down the generations and all the way down to Noah. Then after Noah in Genesis 11, there's further genealogies, and we come down to Terah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the entry into Egypt, the coming out of Egypt, and so forth. And we have very definite dates set. When you come that way, 11,013 BC, all the way down, Abraham 2167, Isaac born 100 years later, 2067, Jacob and Esau born 2007 when Isaac is 60, and so forth. And here's a quick and easy way to check that the biblical calendar is perfectly accurate. The death of Solomon. Solomon died in the year 931 BC. He reigned 40 years, and we can show it with the biblical calendar coming down, getting these dates perfectly accurate. 971, he began to reign in a co-regency with David. 931, he died. Well, Google, how old was, or when did Solomon die? What year did he die? And I did this yesterday, and Wikipedia, of all places, will tell you 931 BC. It actually is one of the few dates where there is wide acceptance with secular and religious or Christian archaeologists. They either will agree 931 or they might say 930. Now they Wikipedia says 931 BCE. That's because they're trying to change it from before Christ to before Common Era, but it's still the same date, 931 BC. And then we know in 1 Kings 6, verse 1 or 2, or the first couple of verses, that the temple was laid in the 4th year of Solomon. So Solomon began to, the Bible tells us he reigned 40 years. If he died 931, he began to reign 971. That's from the Bible. And in his 4th year, 967 BC, the foundation of the temple's laid. 1 Kings 6 tells us it was laid in the 480th year after coming out of Egypt. So you can go from 967, 480 years earlier, you come to the date 1447 for the Exodus, which is confirmed by the biblical calendar. And we know the Bible tells us exactly in Exodus 12 that Israel was 430 years to the self-same day in Egypt. The very same day they went in, 430 years later, they came out. And so we know from 1447, they entered in 1877. And we have the historical record. That's when Jacob and all Israel packed up and left the land of Canaan and went into Egypt in 1877 BC. That's absolute. That's according to the biblical calendar coming down. That is proven with even secular archaeology. And we have 1877. Then we have Pharaoh, strangely, asked Jacob how old he was upon the point of his entry into Egypt, and he says 130, which tells us the birth year for Jacob, 130 years. We would just add it, 1877 plus 130, and you have 2007 BC. And again, Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born, was 60. 2067, Isaac was born. And we know when Isaac was born, Abraham was 100. 2167 BC, the birth date of Abraham. It's confirmation. You see, if Usher and the church were correct, and there's 4,004 years of Old Testament history, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's on the scale of being as ridiculous as evolution. It's so short a period of time. Because if Abraham's born 2167 BC, it leaves about 1900 years for creation and all the time to the flood, the whole destruction of the earth with the flood, the repopulation after the flood, the confusion of languages, the division of continents in the days of Peleg, and on and on and on. All that history in 1900 years. It is absolutely foolish. There's no way Bishop Usher's calendar is remotely accurate. And so we have confirmation that you would expect, since we have 7,000 more years of history than Usher's calendar allows, 7,000 plus on the Old Testament side, that starting with the date of 11,013 and coming down the centuries and the millennium, following the biblical references only, that we would be way off course. And we come down to the precise dates for Abraham that I just mentioned, for Isaac, for the birth of Jacob and Esau, for the entry into Egypt, for the whole stay of Israel in Egypt, for the Exodus, all the way to the laying of the foundation in the 4th year of Solomon in 967. How's that possible? How's that possible? And it's only possible because the biblical calendar is perfectly accurate. And that means when that small assumption was made concerning the age of Levi, I forget it's 77 or I think age 77 when he entered Egypt, then God was showing us, and then it fits together so perfectly, 430. Of course it's true. Of course. And that means, yes, well, further confirms that Jacob spent 40 years in Haran. Well, thank you for that very good question. I'm sorry we've come to the end of our time at this point. Lord willing, we'll have another open forum program tomorrow night at 6 p.m. But for now, I'll have to say good night, and may everyone have a good night, and may the Lord's perfect will be done.
Thanks again for joining us for eBible Fellowship's live open forum program. You can call in with your Bible questions Mondays and Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern, and Wednesdays beginning at noon Eastern.